We're very honoured that a few members of staff think this is important enough to come. We're fine, Martin, thank you very much. But feel free to stay. That we have a very special visitor, a friend of mine, Sujano, that's been in this school before, but only in an evening, never with the classes yet, because he's always been escaping from me somehow, usually to Nepal, but sometimes for sad reasons. But I just thought it was too good an opportunity to miss, to have a friend who lives in Aberdeen, who's from Nepal, where there, I hope you all know, has been one of the worst earthquakes in the history, certainly the West Nepal Sea, for 80 years, where about a quarter of the population of the country are affected. And we are looked at one lesson on happiness last week. If you were here, we should be looking at suffering this week. This morning's classes talked about some questions which, if you don't ask them and they're not covered by what Sujano says, then I will ask on their behalf. Or no, I won't need to, because I'll be here for you tonight. So it's kind of to connect suffering, Buddhism, Nepal. Okay, amazing connection here. And right here in Aberdeen, we have somebody from Nepal who is a Buddhist. Buddhism, suffering is very key idea, isn't it, in Buddhism? Yes. Okay. So I'll hand over to you, and I'll break in if I feel we need a break from them listening to, or if I feel we need to move on. We've got less than half an hour with this one.
Right. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. And thank you very much, everyone, coming to listen to me. Today's topic, I was given suffering, Buddhism, and earthquake in Nepal.
Just like that, in half an hour.
So all these three topics are very huge, but I will try my best to give you the idea. So first we touch about suffering. Have you ever felt suffering? Or do you feel any suffering in your time? When you suffer, what would you say? Oh God, right? Gosh, it's never going to be over again, right? These are the words that we use. And that suffering is not what we are talking in Buddhism. Although main principle or teachings of the Buddha is about suffering, but not exactly the suffering. The translation of the word we call the dukkha is not the suffering. But there is no any other options to translate better than suffering. So that's why it is translated to suffering. So when we talk about the suffering, normally, what is it? We think suffer. Yeah, we are suffering. What is that? Yes? Pain. And then, so even the word suffering, when we talk about the suffering, we still can't see what that is. It's very difficult. So that's why suffering is something that is with us all the time. There was a word question. I read it, and the question was, do we have to have a suffering? Actually, we're born with a suffering. So that's why people will say everything is suffering. And this everything is suffering is not complete. Although sentence grammatically correct, but it's not complete. It's like this is, and still something to explain. So that's why suffering is something that state of undergoing pain, distress, and hardship that we have. So that's why whenever we have pain, we say, gosh, right? When we have a distress, I'm not going to over it again. It's going to be a long time. And when we have a hard time, then, oh, it's painful, right? This is happening like this. So that's the suffering. But whereas in Buddhism, dukkha means something that's not just the pain, not just the distress or the hardship. It's not about just the physical pain, it is not just about the mental pain, and it's not just about the emotional things. Okay, so in Buddhism, that's why suffering or the dukkha, I would say, is classified in three terms. One is called the suffering or pain. Second is called unable to accept the change. and the third is called conditioned. So these are the three terms to understand the suffering. And this, let me give you the example of the Buddha, why he became the Buddha. When he was a prince, he saw three signs: old age, sickness, and the death. When he saw that, immediately stuck in his mind that why do we have to suffer? Okay, why do we have to be old? Why do we have to die? And why do we have to be sick? Have you ever questioned yourself when you see old citizens walking in the street, that why they are so old? And have you ever questioned yourself if you visited hospital or you have seen anyone who is sick, why do we have to be sick? Or whenever you have experienced a death or have heard, have you questioned yourself, why do we have to die? Right? So that's the main term here, suffering. Okay? So he questioned about these three terms, these three incidents, and then he wanted to find a solution. So that's why he renounced his princehood and then went on finding out for 6 years. So he became a monk for 6 years. He went to the different schools, practice and research and lots of esoteric practices, and finally after 6 years he became the Buddha. And then he gave this teaching that there is what he said, my teaching is there is a suffering and we can end the suffering, that's all. So there is a dukkha and there is the end of the dukkha. So, and then this dukkha is suffering, like the first definition of suffering, the pain or the suffering, that is about the physical pain that we have, that is about the emotional pain that we have, and that is about the mental pain that we have. Like when we have some problem, physical problem, and we take it as a pain, and we feel so suffering, right? And then when we have some mental pain, or maybe your teacher given you a math to solve it and you cannot solve once you got home, and say, whoa, what happened to me? So that's a mental pain. And emotional pain is like a death, somebody died or somebody bullied you. That's the emotional pain. And that's the first pain that we can have it. And that's our reaction to those situations. That's how we are in a suffering. So the second term, which is a change, and this change is very important. And this change is unable to understand that everything is change is causing suffering. Okay? If we can accept the change, then it's fine. If we can't, then we are in suffering. And especially in your age, guys, you may be fallen in love with someone and you want to be grasping with her or him. I have a very good formula that you will never be suffering after. You want to have that formula? That is, I wrote it a couple of times and then finally I got this one. You can remember it for your life, and then you will never be disappointed and you will never be in suffering. You want to have that formula? Yeah? So that means you are struggling with your friend, right? So that is, one day, if not me, he or she will leave me. So you can keep in your mind, if you fall in love with someone, that is going to change. No matter how, okay? It is going to change. So that's why when it changes, we cannot accept that change. That's why lots of suicide going on in your age, especially because you fall in love with someone and he or she will say, I want to break you. Right? And then you cannot concentrate in your class, you cannot concentrate in your study, you cannot concentrate anything. You're still grasping that change as unchanged. So that's why you're suffering. So that's the second one. Okay? And the third one is the condition. And that is, it's a little difficult to understand in Buddhism, this one, because this one is something that shows that we all are interdepending with each other. We are depending one to another. Without that person, we won't be here. It's like a man without another man, he cannot be a man. Or without another person, we cannot be in a society. And at the same time, without our father and mother, we cannot be here too. So we are always depending on. And because of that depending, something happens, and then because of the change, again, we'll come back to the second, it relates to the second, and because of change, we again suffer. Okay? So these are the three terms. And what are the cause of it? Why do we suffer? So that's the cause. Why do we suffer? And this, we can take it as something that is not happening as we want it to happen. Something that we want and not happening or not having it, that causes us suffering. And then something that we really want but not happening. And the third one is attachment to something that we hold on. Okay? Because of these, we suffer. Like, you want to have maybe latest iPad, and you went to talk with your mother or father, dad or mom, I want to have this latest iPad. And your mom or dad said, no, you cannot have it. And then what happened? Then you feel suffering, like, that's not fair. This is just what I want, right? So there is I want, okay? That causes suffering. Again, the second one would be same like if you fall in love with someone and you have an attachment to that person so much, and you think about him or her a lot, and then that attachment causes another suffering too. And how can we solve it then? There should be a solution for that one, because Buddhism is not just talking about the suffering. Buddha just said there is a suffering whether Buddha is there or not. Before Buddha was born, there is a suffering. While he was there, it's still a suffering, and after he died, will be suffering too. Suffering is inevitable. Once we're born, there is a suffering. Whether Buddha said it or not, there is a suffering. So that's why Buddha just said, there is a suffering, and when there is a suffering, that means there is an origin of that suffering too. So we have to find the origin of that suffering, that why I am having this problem. Suppose you cannot solve the problem, your math problem, you can link to yourself why I can't solve that math problem. Maybe I didn't pay attention when teacher was explaining this formula. I was thinking about the shopping center, or thinking about getting an iPad, or thinking about my boyfriend or girlfriend that time. So, and then the teacher gave you, okay, this homework, you go back home, because I cannot solve it, right? So that's, where is the cause of it? Cause was you were not paying attention when teacher was explaining. That's the cause. Can we solve it? Yes, why not? We can solve it by asking people, or asking your father or mother or friend. That's the immediate solution, but the best solution would be when teacher is teaching, paying attention. And that will help you to free from any suffering. Once you know this origin, then we know how to solve it. So solving is our job. We have to do. Okay, the way is what Buddhism is about, not about the suffering. So all this talking about the suffering, origin, and ending, these are there all the time. Nothing to do with Buddhism at all. Buddha just mentioned that these are things there, well, how we can be happy. Okay, how can we solve these sufferings? So dukkha, and there is a sukha. Okay? Dukkha is something that's suffering. Sukha is where there is no dukkha. Okay, and that sukha is in Buddhism called nirvana, and there is no dukkha, no suffering, and that we can have it, achieve that happiness by understanding our own self. You can take an example of Chile. I think 4 or 5 years ago, about 30 people were trapped in a deep mine. They were trapped for almost 70 days. So if you were there, how do you do? And the best example in that, when I was reading a story, was there was one gentleman about 65 years old. He took control of 30 people and make them calm. And he set up some rules to follow. So as a result, they become really calm. And they were able to solve, even though they were hiding in such a deep underground. So everybody was maintaining, understanding and accepting the condition and hoping that something will happen. Okay? Same thing in our day-to-day life. If something happens, there was a question about it. If something happens, then how to deal with it. So that is, when water is boiling, you cannot touch the hot water. You have to let it cool. Only then you can touch, right? Same formula would be, whenever you have these problems, you cannot deal when it is hot. You have to cool down yourself. Understanding yourself, knowing yourself. By understanding here means physical reactions, verbal reactions, and mental reactions. So understanding the physical, verbal, and mental reactions is the first thing we can do, and that's the path. In Buddhism, that's the path to get the happiness. So that's how we can have a happiness. There is a story. You may like stories, so you can think about it. And okay, the Buddha told this story. One man hit by the arrow, and another man took him to take the arrow out from him and to do to cure it, right? To put some medicines. And this man said, no. He said, no, I want to know what kind of this arrow is. Made of what? Who shot it? The man who shot, how old he is? And how did he hit this arrow? So if we are going detail like this, do you think you can survive this person? He will die. You have to go so far away to find where this arrow coming from. What you have to do is first take away this arrow and then heal yourself. So that's the same thing. I'm coming to the story of the earthquake. An earthquake now happened, and this earthquake we cannot protect. It is there, and in Nepal especially, it's happening all the time, and it's very common. In particularly this one, it was 7.8 magnitude, which is really, really big. It's like you are standing in a very shaky table, or maybe you're drunk and walking like that. So like that. And I have experience, and that was not a 7.8. And that time that was early morning, and I was just washing my face, and it's lifted old earth. Lift the earth and then moves like this. Lifts and then moves. It's really, really shaky. So that is the earthquake. And this time, so far I can trace is over 5,000 people died and over 10,000 people injured and affected probably around 8 million. That's a quarter of our population affected, and 36 provinces really affected, and the UN said about 70,000 houses destroyed and 200,000 become homeless. Okay? And especially the Kathmandu city and Bhaktapur, we have 3 main cities in the Kathmandu Valley. That's called Kathmandu, Bhaktapur and Patan. They are the heritage site, and hundreds and thousands of monuments that's recorded in the UNESCO. Okay, so that's a World Heritage Site, especially the So these 3 cities now flattened, and it's very sad. Well, yes, very sad. For myself, my village is not that much damaged, but my house, not my house actually, my family house, okay, my family house damaged like that. So,
Anyone had anyone who's gone on holiday to Nepal, trekking and visiting? Yeah, right. Okay. Can one of you manage the lights at the back, Mr. Thompson or Mr. Curry?
yes, so that's one of the clips made by someone, and I found it on Facebook, okay, and on this clip, mostly the heritage sites. Before I came here, I was talking with one of the monks. He said they have just managed to reach one of the villages that flattened and only 6 houses left. And that's again inhabitable. Okay? And in that area, people died, about 600 people died in that village. Okay? So now we are just trying our best to raise funds and help. For my side, I am trying my best to raise as much as I can, and it's a really sad time, and especially they are sleeping on the streets and grounds and fields, so like that. Okay, so right, any questions? Or there are some questions maybe I haven't covered.
Yeah, they're not from this set, but
Yes.
we do have only a couple of minutes.
Mhm.
I've got a shoebox there which has already got all my pennies and 5p's from my house in it, plus some other money that was in the stuffing tin. So if any of you would like to contribute through a Buddhist charity, through a Sujano for Nepal, then you can put some money in the shoebox there on your way out. Anyone got a question that they think a good question to finish off?
No.
What would you think was the best question on the list from the class this morning?
Every questions are very good. 19 questions are there, which is pretty good actually. Right, so I will briefly go on every questions, right?
No, you haven't time for that.
No?
You
Okay.
have to pick one. I have to be bossy here, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
But they have to move on.
Okay. Who introduced to me Buddhism? Okay. I myself wasn't born Buddhist. I am a Hindu, right? And I chose to be a Buddhist, and my family is still not a Buddhist. Do I have a suffering? Yes, I do. And my father and mother just died. My father died a year ago, and my mother died just 2 months ago. And so I do suffer, but when I am suffering, I'm not praising myself, but I'm accepting the changes, as I mentioned. I'm accepting the changes, and before I cry, I look at my chemical changes that happens in my body, okay? And through understanding my chemical changes in my body allows me to settle me down. So and rather than emotionally becoming a cry or suffer, there isn't any emotional involvement much. But still, I'm still breathing it, okay? So it doesn't mean that I cannot, it's still breathing. And in Buddhism, there is no force. So if you want to be a Buddhist, you can. If you don't want to, that's fine, no problem. And
when did you choose to become a monk then? How soon after you became a Buddhist did you decide to train to be a monk?
Okay, yeah. So when I was doing a college, I bumped into the temple. So then how I became a Buddhist. So that was about 19 years old. I'm just trying to be a good monk and a good Buddhist and learning to meditate. So yeah, like this, I'm just trying to learn and practice and apply in our day-to-day life. So that's why in my definition, Buddhism is not a religion, it's a way of life, how to be happy. And there was one question, do you miss having no possessions? So having a possession or not having a possession, it depends on how we grasp or how much we attach to the possessions. So if we can be happy what we have, then that will be fine. And here in Aberdeen, definitely, I am renting the place as a temple, okay? And I have a car, I have this center, and that's again, although I am living there, this is not my property, so I can leave it anytime. And I'm happy to give it away as well. So, and then there was another question said, how can I be happy, or when I can make someone happy, or when I can make someone free from their suffering, then that makes me happy. So in your life as well, if you can make changes to someone's life, then that is your happiness too.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You really listened well, and if you'd like to visit Sujano's temple with me sometime in June, once you've finished all your gallivanting and exams and all the rest of it, we'll be taking some upper threes to Constitution Street to visit.
Yes.